To understand geopolitics, you need to understand world history, and the best way to understand world history is to find a really good historian who can talk to you about the diversity and plurality of all the different cultures and civilizations that have existed over time in history. And the problem is there are many big theories out there about how to do that, like Spengler and people like that, Toynbee, some of whom have written incredibly long books, like Toynbee's Study of History has 13 volumes. So how can you get a big overview of the diversity of world history and of geopolitics, of all the different civilizations that make up our multipolar world in just one book with a bit of style and wit? And there is, fortunately, a solution, and that is Felipe Fernàndez-Armesto's Civilizations, which is a book from 2000, and it is a brilliant book about civilizations. And the great thing about this book is it doesn't lock up the idea of civilizations or all the different cultures around the world in a sort of rigid, old-fashioned idea about civilization as developing along one path. It has an extraordinary, open-minded, generous and innovative idea about civilizations. It talks about civilization as a process of adapting, of human societies adapting nature to their needs. And in different environments and in different circumstances, human societies have adopted the strangest and most wonderful and fascinating different ways of doing it. No one model is better, or high standard, high level of accomplishment, high level of cultural achievement. There is no single acme of civilization, not even that much venerated Western civilization. And if you read Felipe Fernàndez-Armesto's book, Civilization, you will get both a wonderful essay at the start about the history of writing, the history of civilizations, that puts his special idea about civilizations in context. He'll talk about Spengler, he'll talk about Toynbee, he'll also talk about both Samuel Huntington and his predecessor Ellsworth Huntington, who sort of have developed the various typologies of civilization and the ideas of the rise and fall of the West. And I do talk about those in my podcast, which I'm adding to a YouTube video, which you can look at the links below. Fernàndez-Armesto's book is this fascinating reinterpretation of the history of civilizations to put them in the context of the environment. He himself sort of began his professional career as an historian, as a historian of the environment, and he's also looked a lot at navigation and explorers and I guess the history of oceans and things like that. So he has a unique perspective, and what's also he has sort of a charming wit about him as well, a deliberate playfulness. He writes very well, and he also chooses superb examples that give you the flavour. And by reading his book, he effectively gives a comprehensive sort of overview of many different civilizations that sort of breaks up the usual patterns of thought about it that doesn't just follow the usual, well, there was the rise and fall of Rome, and then there was medieval Europe, and then there was the West, and then, oh yeah, there are all these other parts of the world that we kind of forgot about as well. He actually starts his story really he structures his book by the different kinds of environment, and that sort of reshuffles the sort of deck of cards of world history in a really interesting and really innovative way. And he basically has 4 key ideas about the thinking about civilizations that are very relevant to thinking about geopolitics and world history today. First of all, he talks about civilization is a process. It's not a final state of things. There's not some places that are, have achieved civilization and others that are not. There's not civilization and there's barbarism. Rather, civilization is a process that it finds different forms and expressions in different ways. He also says civilization is not progress. That the temptation is always to reinterpret history as the evolution to how we came to be the wonderful people that we are today. But in fact, the weird and wonderful stories of history just don't follow that pattern, and he's absolutely superb at conveying both the contingency and also the ups and downs of fortune of many places. And finally, thirdly, he talks about civilization as this process of adapting environments to human needs. He talks about the itch to civilize. It's something that is all over the place. And finally, he puts no hierarchy on different civilizations. Some civilizations are not better than others. He has a genuinely pluralistic appreciation of them all. So it's a wonderful, imaginative, experimental work of world history that I think really helps you rethink your own thinking about the timelines and the stories of world history. And it also helps you understand the story of human culture as part of the story of the natural world, as this really complicated relationship to our environment that we still are working through today. As he says in his introduction, these stories about the stories he tells about civilization go to the heart of the problem of what a civilization is. I propose to define it as a type of relationship, a relationship to the natural environment, recrafted by the civilizing impulse to meet human demands. So civilization is a relationship to the environment. It is not civilizing other people. It is civilizing the environment in which different cultures live. By a civilization, I mean a society in such a relationship. I do not necessarily mean that all civilizations are in any sense good, though I happen to like some of them, or bad, though I am aware of their dangers. One lesson of this book is that civilizations commonly overexploit their environments, often to the point of self-destruction. For some purposes, including in some environments, survival itself, civilization is a risky and even irrational strategy. And if I just take you through the chapter headings of his book, that will give you the sense of the range of civilizations and how this is not just the usual story of the rise of the West. which I think is a really necessary antidote to thinking about the multipolar world that we're in today, to see it as in a big, complex, diverse world. So his part one is looking at the wasteland, and this also gives you a sense of the fondness for literary illusion of Fernàndez-Armesto, and what a joy it is to actually read his work. It's witty, it's well written, it's vivid, it's descriptive, it chooses its material incredibly well. And in that he looks at ice worlds and tundra as human habitats, and he looks at deserts of sand, adaptation and counter-adaptation in deserts of sand. And then he looks at grasslands, the prairie and the grassy savanna, and the Eurasian steppe, which he describes as the highway of civilizations. Then he looks at civilization in tropical lowlands and post-glacial forests, the wild woods of post-glacial and temperate woodland, including in Europe, and hearts of darkness, tropical lowlands, more literary references. In part 4, he looks at the shining fields of mud, alluvial soils in drying climates, including the misleading cases of the Near East and the environments of origin in China and India. And that's, I guess, where often the traditional stories of civilizations focus. The Near East, the Middle East, I guess, is where we'd probably call it now these days, and China and India. Then he looks at civilizing highlands, the highland civilizations of the New World, like the Incas and the Aztecs, and the highland civilizations of the Old World, like the Scots and that sort of thing. Then he looks in part 6 at civilizations shaped by the sea, small island civilizations, seaboard civilizations, the seaboard civilizations of maritime Asia, chasing the monsoon, and then the tradition of Ulysses, the Greek and Roman seaboards. Then finally, in part 7, he looks at the domestication of the oceans, the rise of oceanic civilizations, the making of Atlantic civilization, and the final chapter, the Atlantic and other Atlantic supremacy and the global outlook. And those final 2 chapters are very much part of his reflection on the story of the West and this weird idea of Atlantic, the Atlantic world of Western civilization. He even speculates that perhaps the next great struggle over the ocean will be around the Arctic Ocean, and recent events in geopolitics would tend to confirm that prediction of over 20 years ago. It's a fabulous book. I highly recommend reading it. It gives you insight and colour and detail and a whole stock of cultural references and vivid stories of the extraordinary inventiveness of human culture in so many different environments, and the successful adaptation to so many different kinds of environment, some seemingly inhospitable, others seemingly a paradise on earth, and the frequent story of over-exploitation of environments that still haunts us today. And more than anything, it book will just help shake up the inherited preconceptions we tend to have about, driven, I guess, by Anglo-American versions of the rise of the West, of this sort of linear story of Rome and Greece, and then medieval Europe, and then Renaissance, and the British Empire, and then America. And if you, I've also done a series of podcasts that I am releasing as a playlist on my YouTube channel that looks in a little bit more detail at Felipe Fernandez's book and at some of the civilizations in each of those main environments that he talks about. And in those videos, you'll learn about the Sami and the West and Oswald Spengler, the Sri Vijayan civilization, and others as well. So do look out for those. You can check them out on the links below. I hope you've enjoyed this video.